The first time I saw my wife Julia kissing another man, I was holding a paintbrush covered in crimson. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been painting blood-red roses when I witnessed the death of my marriage through our cottage window. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name is Ethan Carter, and 6 months ago, I was a successful architect in Boston with a beautiful wife, a smart daughter, and what I thought was a perfect life. Then I had a mild stroke at 42, not enough to kill me, just enough to scramble my brain like morning eggs and force me to reevaluate everything. "You need to slow down," Dr. Peterson had said, his voice carrying that particular blend of authority and pity that doctors perfect in medical school. "Find a hobby, something creative, paint, maybe." So here I was in Millbrook, Maine, a coastal town where the biggest excitement was usually the annual lobster festival. Julia had found us this charming fixer-upper cottage, claiming the sea air would help my recovery. What she really meant was that it would keep me busy while she ran her new art gallery in town. "Ethan, you're dripping paint on the floor again," Julia called from the kitchen, her voice sharp with that familiar edge of irritation that had become our normal conversation tone. I looked down at my brush. Sure enough, red paint was pooling on the hardwood like tiny crime scenes. "Sorry," I muttered, grabbing a rag. "Still getting used to this whole artist thing." Julia appeared in the doorway, looking effortlessly elegant even in casual clothes. At 39, she still turned heads wherever she went, with her auburn hair and green eyes that could shift from warm to ice cold in seconds. Right now, they were definitely in the Arctic zone. "Maybe you should stick to painting the porch," she said, not bothering to hide her smirk. "At least that would be useful." "Thanks for the support, honey. Really feeling the love?" She rolled her eyes. "I'm just saying, we have actual work to do on this house. The gallery opening is next week, and I can't afford any distractions." That was Julia in a nutshell. Everything was about her gallery, her career, her image in this small town where she was determined to become the cultural queen bee. My stroke, my recovery, my new hobby, all distractions from the Julia Carter show. "Dad, your painting looks amazing," Lily said, bouncing into the room with the energy only 16-year-olds possess. Our daughter had her mother's looks, but thankfully inherited my sense of humor and loyalty. "Those roses look so real, I want to smell them." "At least someone appreciates my artistic vision," I said, ruffling her dark hair. Julia's phone buzzed, and she immediately grabbed it with the urgency of a surgeon receiving word of an emergency. Her face lit up in a way it hadn't when looking at me in months. "That's Trent," she said, already heading for the door. "He needs help hanging his pieces for the opening. I'll be back late." "Who's Trent?" I asked, though something in my gut already knew I wouldn't like the answer. "Trent Morgan. He's a local artist. Very talented, very successful. His work is going to be the centerpiece of our opening exhibition." The way she said "very talented" made my teeth clench. There was admiration there, the kind of breathless appreciation she used to reserve for my architectural designs back when she gave a damn about my work. "Can I come?" Lily asked. "I'd love to see his art." "No," Julia said quickly. "It's going to be very late and you have school tomorrow. Besides, it's just boring gallery stuff." After she left, Lily flopped onto the couch with a dramatic sigh. "Dad, can I tell you something?" "Always, kiddo. What's on your mind?" "I saw Mom with some guy in a convertible yesterday, a red one. Really flashy, you know? They were parked by the marina and they looked, I don't know, close." My paintbrush stopped moving. "Close how?" "Like, talking really intensely. And when she got out, he grabbed her hand. It seemed weird." I set down my brush carefully, trying to keep my voice casual. "What did this guy look like?" "Older than you, I think. Gray hair, but like deliberately messy. Wearing one of those expensive leather jackets that tries too hard to look cool. Oh, and he had this really obnoxious laugh. I could hear it from across the parking lot." "Trent Morgan." Had to be. The pieces were falling into place like a puzzle I didn't want to solve. That night, I couldn't sleep. Julia came home at nearly 2 a.m, slipping into bed like a ghost. She smelled like expensive cologne, not mine, and something else. Paint thinner, maybe, or lies. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. "How was the gallery work?" I whispered. "Fine," she mumbled. "Go back to sleep." But I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and wondered when my wife had become a stranger and why I was only noticing it now. Maybe the stroke had scrambled more than my motor skills. Maybe it had cleared my vision. The next morning, Julia was gone before I woke up, leaving only a note about early gallery business and cold coffee. I spent the morning painting, trying to lose myself in the rhythm of brush strokes, but my mind kept wandering to red convertibles and expensive cologne. Around noon, my best friend Nate showed up with sandwiches and his usual arsenal of inappropriate jokes. Nate Sullivan was an ex-cop turned handyman, built like a linebacker but with the heart of a teddy bear. He'd been helping me with the cottage repairs, partly because he was good with his hands, mostly because he was worried about me. "You look like hell," he said, setting down a bag from the local deli. "Let me guess, Julia? When did I become so transparent?" "Around the time you started painting your feelings instead of talking about them. What's going on?" I told him about the convertible, about Julia's late nights, about the way she lit up when talking about Trent Morgan. Nate listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or making small grunts of understanding. "So what are you going to do about it?" he asked when I finished. "What can I do? I don't have proof of anything. Maybe I'm just being paranoid. Or maybe you're finally paying attention. Look, Ethan, I've known Julia almost as long as you have. She's ambitious, always has been. But lately..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Lately she looks at you like you're a project she's tired of working on." That hit harder than I expected. "Thanks for the pep talk, coach. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to wake you up. If something's going on, you need to know. And if she's playing games, you need to be ready to play them better." That afternoon, I decided to take a walk through town. Millbrook was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, which usually annoyed me but now seemed potentially useful. I stopped by the hardware store, the coffee shop, the bookstore, just making conversation, getting a feel for the local gossip. At the coffee shop, I struck gold. The barista, a chatty college kid named Emma, was full of information about the local art scene. "Oh, you're Julia Carter's husband. She's so lucky to have landed Trent Morgan for the opening. He's like the most successful artist in 3 counties. And so charming. All the ladies love him." "Charming how?" "You know, that whole mysterious artist thing. Plus, he drives this amazing vintage Mustang convertible, red like something out of a movie. I heard he's been spending a lot of time at the gallery helping your wife with the setup." "I bet he has. They make a good team, you know. Both so passionate about art. It's nice to see people who really understand each other's work." I ordered another coffee I didn't want, just to keep the conversation going. "Has he always been single? Seems like a guy like that would be married." "Oh, he was. Divorced about 2 years ago. His ex-wife said he was impossible to live with. Too self-centered, always putting his art first. But honestly, she was kind of a bitch. Really controlling, you know. She never understood his creative process." Interesting. So Trent had a type. Married women who appreciated his creative process. I spent the rest of the week quietly investigating, playing the role of the oblivious husband while keeping my eyes and ears open. I discovered that Trent Morgan was indeed successful, but also deeply in debt. His expensive lifestyle was funded by charm and credit cards, not actual sales. He'd been behind on his studio rent for 3 months and owed money to half the businesses in town. I also learned that Julia had been lying about her schedule. The gallery wasn't open as late as she claimed, and several people mentioned seeing her and Trent together at odd hours, coffee at dawn, lunch at the marina, long walks on the beach when she was supposedly working. The final piece of evidence came by accident. I was looking for my old college sweatshirt in Julia's closet when I found it, a painting hidden behind her winter coats. It was unmistakably Julia, painted with intimate detail that could only come from extensive observation. She was partially clothed, looking over her shoulder with a sultry smile I hadn't seen in years. In the bottom right corner was a signature, T. Morgan. I stared at that painting for a long time, feeling something cold and hard settle in my chest. It wasn't just anger, it was clarity. Julia wasn't just having an affair, she was planning something bigger. The way she'd been moving money around, her sudden interest in this small-town gallery, her eagerness to get me out of Boston and away from my support network, it all made sense now. She was setting up her new life, and I was the obstacle she needed to remove. That night, Julia came home earlier than usual, actually seeming to make an effort at normalcy. She asked about my painting, complimented dinner, even suggested we watch a movie together. It was a performance, and not a particularly good one. "The gallery opening is tomorrow night," she said during a commercial break. "I know you're not really into the art scene, but it would mean a lot if you came. Show support for my new venture." "Of course I'll be there. Wouldn't miss it." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Just, please don't embarrass me, okay? These people are important for my career. Try to fit in." "Don't worry, honey. I'll be the perfect husband." And I would be. Right up until the moment I decided not to be. The Millbrook Gallery was buzzing with the kind of pretentious energy that made my teeth itch. Julia had transformed the space into something that belonged in Soho, not a Maine fishing town. Track lighting highlighted carefully arranged paintings and sculptures, while servers in black uniforms circulated with wine and cheese that probably cost more than most locals made in a week. I stood near the entrance, nursing a glass of wine and watching Julia work the room. She was in her element, gliding between clusters of guests with practiced grace, her red dress catching the light as she gestured toward various pieces. Every few minutes, her eyes would find Trent Morgan across the room, and they'd share a look that made my stomach turn. Trent was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, silver-haired, wearing an expensive blazer over dark jeans in that calculated, casual way that screamed artistic genius. He held court near his centerpiece painting, a massive abstract piece that looked like someone had sneezed paint onto a canvas and charged $5,000 for the privilege. "Quite the turnout," said a voice beside me. I turned to see an elderly woman with sharp eyes and perfectly styled gray hair. She extended a manicured hand. "Margaret Kelleher, I own the building." "Ethan Carter, I'm Julia's husband." "Ah, yes, the architect. Julia's told me so much about you." Her tone suggested it hadn't all been flattering. "How are you enjoying our little cultural renaissance?" "It's educational." She laughed, a sound like ice clinking in crystal. "Diplomatic. I like that. Tell me, what do you think of Mr. Morgan's work?" I looked across the room at Trent, who was currently explaining his artistic vision to a group of admirers that included 2 women young enough to be his daughters. "I think he's very good at selling himself." "Interesting perspective. You know, I've been in this business for 40 years, and I can usually spot the real artists from the charlatans within minutes. Mr. Morgan is complicated." "How so?" "Talented enough to be dangerous, smart enough to be convincing, but lacking the integrity that separates true artists from mere performers. He's also broke, which makes him desperate. Desperate men make poor choices." Before I could respond, a younger man approached us, thin, pale, with the kind of goatee that immediately marked him as someone who took himself very seriously. "Mrs. Kelleher, have you met Simon Hartley? He's the art critic from the Portland Tribune," the man said, inserting himself into our conversation with the subtlety of a car crash. "Mr. Hartley," Mrs. Kelleher said coolly. "I didn't realize the Tribune was covering small-town gallery openings now." "When the art is this significant, geography becomes irrelevant," Simon replied pompously. Trent Morgan's work transcends regional boundaries. He's creating something truly revolutionary here. I nearly choked on my wine. Revolutionary? It looks like he threw paint at a wall and hoped for the best. Simon's eyes narrowed as he focused on me for the first time. And you are? The husband, I said simply. Ah. His smile turned predatory. Well, not everyone has the sophistication to appreciate abstract expressionism. It requires a certain refinement of taste, or a willingness to pretend the emperor is wearing clothes. The conversation was attracting attention. I could see Julia across the room, her face tight with anxiety, as she noticed people turning to watch our little group. Simon, however, was just getting warmed up. You know, he said, his voice carrying just loud enough for nearby guests to hear, it's fascinating how some people are threatened by artistic passion, especially when their own creative efforts are so limited. Limited how? Well, I've heard about your little painting hobby. Very sweet, really. Like a child playing with finger paints. But when you're surrounded by real art, real passion, real talent, he gestured toward Trent's work, it must be intimidating. Mrs. Kelleher stepped back slightly, recognizing the shift in atmosphere. Other guests were openly staring now, sensing drama. This was exactly what Julia had been afraid of, me making a scene at her big moment. You're right, I said, my voice calm and conversational. I am intimidated. It takes real courage to charge $5,000 for something that looks like a toddler's tantrum. I could never be that bold. Simon's face flushed. Art isn't about what it looks like to untrained eyes. It's about emotion, about passion, about the relationship between artist and subject. Trent's work captures something raw and honest about human desire. Human desire? Is that what we're calling it? The words hung in the air like smoke. Simon's mouth opened and closed like a fish, while Mrs. Kelleher's eyebrows rose toward her hairline. Across the room, I could see Julia excusing herself from her conversation, heading our way with the determined stride of someone about to commit murder. Ethan, she said, appearing at my elbow with a smile so forced it looked painful. I see you've met Simon. He's been such a wonderful supporter of the gallery. We were just discussing artistic passion, I said. Simon was explaining how some relationships transcend traditional boundaries. Julia's grip on my arm tightened. How interesting. Simon, would you excuse us for a moment? I need to introduce Ethan to some other guests. She practically dragged me toward a quieter corner of the gallery, her fingernails digging into my jacket sleeve. Once we were out of earshot, she turned on me with fury blazing in her green eyes. What the hell is wrong with you? She hissed. I specifically asked you not to embarrass me. I'm just making conversation. Isn't that what you wanted? Me fitting in with your new friends? You know exactly what you're doing. This is important, Ethan. These people could make or break my career in this town. And we can't have that, can we? Not when you've worked so hard to build your new life here. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or fear. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. I'm just proud of how dedicated you've been. All those late nights, all that personal attention to your artist's needs, very hands-on approach. You're being paranoid. Am I? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you and Trent have developed quite the collaborative relationship. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating, trying to figure out how much I knew. Finally, she forced another smile. Trent is a professional colleague. If you can't handle me working with attractive men without turning into a jealous teenager, maybe the problem isn't with me. You're right. Maybe the problem is that I haven't been paying enough attention. But I'm paying attention now. Before she could respond, Trent himself appeared beside us, moving with the kind of casual confidence that only comes from knowing you're the center of attention. Julia, there you are. The Times critic wants to discuss commissioning a piece. He glanced at me with barely concealed dismissal. You must be the husband. Ethan, right? That's right. And you must be the artist. I've heard so much about your work. All good things, I hope. His smile was perfect. White teeth, crinkled eyes, the kind of charm that probably worked on most people. Julia tells me you've taken up painting yourself. That's wonderful. Art can be very therapeutic. Therapeutic. That's one way to put it. You should bring some of your work by the gallery sometime. I'd be happy to take a look, give you some pointers. It's always nice to encourage beginners. The condescension was so thick I could have spread it on toast. Behind Trent, I could see Julia watching nervously, probably wondering if I was about to explode. Instead, I smiled. That's very generous of you. I'd love to get your professional opinion. After all, you clearly have so much experience with intimate subjects. Trent's smile faltered slightly. I'm sorry? Your art. It's very personal, very revealing. You must spend a lot of time with your models to capture that kind of emotional depth. Yes. Well, good art requires understanding your subject matter. I'm sure it does. Julia's lucky to have found someone so committed to understanding. The three of us stood there in silence for a moment, the subtext crackling between us like electricity. Finally, Trent cleared his throat. Well, I should get back to my admirers. Ethan, it was interesting meeting you. Julia, we'll talk later about that commission. After he left, Julia turned to me with a look that could have melted steel. What was that about? Just getting to know your business partner. He seems very hands-on. You're acting crazy. Maybe. Or maybe I'm finally seeing clearly. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced smiles and stilted conversations. I played the role of supportive husband while watching Julia and Trent orbit each other like binary stars, always aware of where the other was, always finding excuses to touch, a hand on an arm, a whisper in an ear, a shared laugh at some private joke. By the time we got home, the mask had slipped completely. Julia was furious, pacing around our bedroom like a caged animal, while I sat on the edge of the bed, calmly removing my shoes. You ruined everything, she said. Do you have any idea how hard I've worked to build relationships in this community? And you just sabotaged it all with your paranoid accusations. I didn't accuse anyone of anything. I just made conversation. Bullshit. You were fishing, making implications, trying to embarrass me in front of important people. If you're embarrassed by the truth, maybe the problem isn't with my conversation skills. She stopped pacing and stared at me. What truth? What are you talking about? I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone, scrolling to the photo I'd taken earlier, Trent's painting of her, the one hidden in her closet. Her face went white. Where did you get that? Does it matter? The question is, when were you planning to tell me about your new modeling career? She sat down heavily on the chair by our window, all the fight going out of her like air from a punctured balloon. For a moment, she looked almost vulnerable, almost like the woman I'd married 15 years ago. It's not what you think, she said quietly. Really? Because what I think is that you've been having an affair with a broke artist who sees you as his ticket to financial stability, and you see him as your escape from a marriage you're tired of. How am I doing so far? Tears started to form in her eyes, but I wasn't sure if they were from guilt or frustration at being caught. Ethan, please, let me explain. Go ahead. I'm listening. She took a shaky breath. Trent and we connected over art, over passion for something beautiful. You've been so distant since the stroke, so focused on your recovery that you barely notice I exist. He sees me, really sees me, in a way you haven't in years. So this is my fault? It's nobody's fault. It just happened. We didn't plan it. But you're planning to leave me for him? She didn't deny it, which was answer enough. When? I asked. I don't know. I haven't decided anything yet. Bullshit. You've been moving money around for months, setting up your new life. The only question is whether you were planning to divorce me or just disappear one day. She looked up at me with surprise. How did you know about the money? I'm not as oblivious as you think, Julia. I'm also not as helpless as you've convinced yourself I am. I stood up and walked to the door, pausing with my hand on the knob. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to end it with Trent, publicly and permanently. You're going to recommit to this marriage and to rebuilding what we once had. Or, I'm going to make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of woman you really are. You can't threaten me. I'm not threatening you. I'm giving you a choice. Make it wisely. I left her sitting there in the dark and went to my studio, where I picked up a brush and started painting. This time, I wasn't painting roses. I was painting a storm. The next morning, Julia was gone before I woke up, and she didn't come home that night. Or the next. Lily was worried, asking questions I couldn't answer without destroying her image of her mother. So I lied, told her Julia was dealing with gallery business, staying late to handle the success of the opening. Dad, are you and Mom getting divorced? Lily asked on the third morning, her voice small and scared as she picked at her cereal. Why would you ask that? Because you guys have been weird lately, and Mom's never gone this long without calling me. I sat down across from her at the kitchen table, trying to find words that were honest but not devastating. Your mom and I are going through a rough patch, but whatever happens between us, it has nothing to do with how much we both love you. That's what parents always say before they get divorced. Smart kid. Too smart sometimes. You're right, they do. But in this case, it's true. You're the best thing your mother and I ever did together, and nothing will change that. She nodded, but I could see the worry in her eyes. Another thing to add to Julia's tab. Around noon, Nate showed up with coffee and the local gossip. So, word around town is that your wife has moved in with the artist, he said without preamble. Thought you should know before someone else told you. Where'd you hear that? Emma at the coffee shop. Apparently, Julia's been seen coming and going from Trent's studio at all hours. His place is above the bakery on Main Street, and Mrs. Patterson, who runs the bakery, has been keeping track. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Of course she has. Nothing like small-town surveillance to keep you informed. What are you going to do? I'm going to give her what she wants. Nate raised an eyebrow. Which is? A divorce, but on my terms, not hers. That afternoon, I drove into town and made several stops. First, the bank, where I discovered that Julia had indeed been moving money, but not as much as she thought. My stroke might have slowed me down, but it hadn't made me stupid. I'd been quietly protecting our assets for weeks. Next, I visited a lawyer, not one of the obvious choices, but a sharp woman named Patricia Wells, who specialized in family law and had a reputation for being both discreet and ruthless. Mr. Carter, she said, reviewing the documents I'd brought. This is quite a comprehensive file. You've been planning this for a while. Let's just say I've been paying attention. Your wife has made several tactical errors, moving in with her lover before filing for divorce, attempting to hide assets, abandoning the family home. These things don't play well with judges, especially in small towns. What about custody? With your daughter's age and the circumstances, she'll likely get to choose where she wants to live. Based on what you've told me about your relationship with her, I don't think you need to worry. My final stop was the most important one, Trent's studio. I climbed the narrow stairs above the bakery, breathing in the smell of fresh bread mixed with paint fumes and something else. Betrayal, maybe, or just the mustiness of a man living beyond his means. I knocked on the door, and after a moment, Trent opened it. He was wearing paint-stained jeans and nothing else, his silver hair messed up like he'd just rolled out of bed, which he probably had. Ethan, this is unexpected. I was in the neighborhood, thought we should talk. He glanced back into the apartment nervously. This isn't really a good time. I'm sure it's not, but it'll just take a minute. I pushed past him into the studio, which was exactly what I'd expected. Pretentious art, expensive furniture he couldn't afford, and evidence of Julia everywhere. Her purse on the counter, her jacket on a chair, her shoes by the door. She's not here, Trent said quickly. I know. She's at the gallery trying to salvage her reputation after the other night. Which, by the way, how's that going? I heard several people canceled their orders. His face darkened. What do you want, Ethan? I want to make you an offer. I'm not interested in whatever. $5,000. That stopped him mid-sentence. What? 5,000 cash for you to disappear. Leave town, leave Julia alone, start fresh somewhere else. He stared at me for a long moment, then started laughing. You're serious? You actually think you can buy me off? I think you're broke. I think you owe money all over town. I think $5,000 sounds pretty good to a man who's been living on charm and credit cards. And I think you're a pathetic old man who can't handle the fact that his wife found someone better. I nodded slowly. You're probably right. But here's the thing. I'm a pathetic old man with money and connections and nothing left to lose. You're a broke artist with a reputation that's about to get a lot worse. What's that supposed to mean? I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo. Trent's signature on a gallery receipt, right next to a note about payment being delayed pending verification of authenticity. Funny thing about small towns, I said. People talk. And when they start talking about an artist who might be forging signatures on his work, well, that's the kind of reputation that follows you everywhere. That's not a forgery. That's my signature. I know that. You know that. But do you think the people who've invested thousands of dollars in your work will want to take that chance? Especially when rumors start spreading about your personal ethics? His face had gone pale. You bastard. Probably. But I'm a bastard with nothing left to lose, which makes me dangerous. Take the money, Trent. Disappear. Find some other married woman to seduce in some other town. And if I don't? Then I make your life very, very difficult. Starting with a call to the Portland Tribune's art critic. You remember Simon, right? He seemed very interested in your work. I bet he'd love to investigate some authenticity questions. Trent stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him calculating odds, weighing options. Finally, he shook his head. You think this will bring her back to you? Even if I leave, she's not going to suddenly fall in love with you again. Maybe not. But she's also not going to run away with a broke artist who abandoned her when things got complicated. She loves me. She loves the idea of you, the fantasy of escaping her boring life with her boring husband. But fantasies don't pay bills or provide security or stick around when real problems arise. I set an envelope on his counter. There's $1,000. The rest comes when you're gone. You have 24 hours to decide. I was almost to the door when he called after me. What makes you think I won't just take the money and stay anyway? I turned back with a smile that felt like broken glass. Because then I'd have to get creative. And trust me, you don't want to see what I'm like when I get creative. That evening, Julia finally came home. She looked exhausted, defeated, like someone who'd been fighting a losing battle. She found me in my studio, working on a new painting, this one of a shipwreck on jagged rocks. We need to talk, she said. I'm listening. I heard you went to see Trent. Word travels fast in a small town. He told me what you said, about the forgeries, about ruining his reputation. Did he also tell you about the money I offered him to leave? She flinched. Yes. And what did he say? She was quiet for a long moment, staring at my painting. He said he needed time to think. Ah. So when faced with a choice between you and his career, he needs time to think. How romantic. It's not that simple. Isn't it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks pretty simple. He's willing to risk your marriage, your reputation, and your relationship with your daughter for his own gratification. But the moment his own interests are threatened, suddenly, he needs to consider his options. She sat down on the old chair I kept in the corner, looking smaller than I'd seen her in years. What do you want, Ethan? I want you to come home, really come home. End this thing with Trent, recommit to our marriage, and work on rebuilding what we had. And if I can't do that? Then we get divorced, and you can explain to Lily why you chose a man you've known for 6 months over the family you've had for 16 years. You're manipulating me. I'm giving you the same choice you were planning to give me, except I'm doing it honestly, to your face, instead of sneaking around behind your back. She started crying then, real tears this time, not the calculated ones she'd used before. I don't know if I can fix this. I don't know if I can go back to being the person I was before. I'm not asking you to go back. I'm asking you to go forward, with me. What if it doesn't work? What if we try and it just falls apart again? Then at least we'll know we tried. At least Lily will know her parents fought for their marriage instead of just giving up. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her makeup. Trent's leaving town. I know. He took your money. I figured he would. Are you happy about that? I set down my brush and looked at her. Really looked at her. Maybe for the first time in months. She looked lost, confused, like someone waking up from a dream to find herself in a place she didn't recognize. No, I said finally. I'm not happy about any of this. I'm angry and hurt and disappointed. But I'm also willing to try again if you are. She nodded slowly. Okay, let's try. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It wasn't even a particularly satisfying one. But it was honest, which was more than we'd had in months. And sometimes, honesty is the only foundation you can build on. For 3 weeks, Julia and I played house like actors in a community theater production of Happy Marriage. She came home for dinner, asked about my painting, even suggested we take walks on the beach together. Lily was thrilled, chattering about family movie nights and planning our summer vacation. I wanted to believe it was real. I wanted to believe that losing Trent had shocked Julia back to her senses, made her realize what she'd almost thrown away. But there were signs, small ones at first, then increasingly obvious, that we were just going through the motions. She still checked her phone constantly, still found excuses to go into town alone, still looked at me sometimes like I was a stranger she was stuck with. And there was something else, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. A sense of anticipation, like she was waiting for something. The answer came on a rainy Thursday morning when Nate showed up at my door with a grim expression and a newspaper. You need to see this, he said, handing me the Portland Tribune's arts section. The headline read, Local Artist Dies in Car Accident. Below it was a photo of Trent Morgan, smiling that practiced, charming smile. When? I asked. 2 days ago. Lost control of his car on Route 1, went off the road into the rocks. They think he fell asleep at the wheel. I read the article twice, looking for details. Trent had been driving north toward the Canadian border at 3 in the morning. His car had been packed with his belongings, like he was moving permanently. There was no mention of alcohol or drugs, no suggestion of suicide. Just a tired man driving too late at night on a dangerous road. You okay? Nate asked. I don't know. Should I be? That depends. Did you have anything to do with this? I looked at him sharply. Are you asking if I killed him? I'm asking if you know more about his departure than you've told me. I told him about my visit to Trent's studio, about the money, about the threats I'd made. Nate listened without judgment, occasionally nodding. So he took your money and left town just like you wanted, he said when I finished. Looks that way. And now he's dead. Yeah. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the rain against the windows. Finally, Nate spoke again. How do you feel about it? Honestly, I don't know. I didn't want him dead. I just wanted him gone. Well, he's definitely gone. That afternoon, I had to tell Julia and Lily about Trent's death. Lily was shocked, but not particularly upset. She'd barely known him. Julia, however, went white as paper and had to sit down. "How?" she whispered. "Car accident. He was leaving town, driving north." "When?" "Tuesday night. Early Wednesday morning, technically." She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. Finally, she looked up at me with an expression I couldn't read. "He called me," she said. "Tuesday night. He wanted to see me before he left." "Did you go?" "No. I told him it was over, that I was trying to fix my marriage. He was upset." "Upset how?" "Angry. He said some things." She trailed off, shaking her head. It doesn't matter now. But it did matter, and we both knew it. Trent's death had changed everything, turned our fragile reconciliation into something else entirely. Julia wasn't trying to rebuild our marriage anymore. She was grieving for her lost lover, and I was the man who'd driven him away. The funeral was 3 days later. Julia wanted to go, but I talked her out of it. "It'll just fuel more gossip," I said. "People are already talking about the affair. Showing up at his funeral won't help either of our reputations." She agreed, but I could see the resentment in her eyes. I was keeping her from saying goodbye to the man she'd loved, and she hated me for it. That night, after Lily went to bed, Julia and I had our first real conversation since Trent's death. "I know what you're thinking," I said. "Do you?" "You're thinking that if I hadn't interfered, Trent would still be alive. You're thinking that I'm responsible for his death." She didn't deny it. "Maybe you're right," I continued. "Maybe if I'd just let you go, if I'd handled this differently, he'd still be alive, and you'd be happy. Would that have been so terrible? For me, yes. For Lily, probably. For you?" I shrugged. "I guess we'll never know." She started crying again, but these tears were different, deeper, more raw. These were tears for a future that would never exist, for a man who would never hold her again, for choices that couldn't be unmade. "I loved him," she said. "I know. I really loved him. I know. And now he's gone, and I'm stuck here with you, and I don't know how to pretend anymore." That was the moment I knew our marriage was really over. Not when I found the painting, not when she moved in with Trent, not even when she chose him over me. It was when she looked at me with such raw honesty and told me I was the consolation prize she couldn't bear to accept. "So don't pretend," I said. "What?" "Don't pretend. Let's get divorced. Let's end this cleanly and honestly, and both try to find some kind of happiness." She stared at me in surprise. "You'd do that? After everything you did to keep me?" "I didn't fight for you, Julia. I fought for the idea of you, for the marriage I thought we had. But that marriage died a long time ago. I just wasn't ready to admit it." "What about Lily?" "Lily's 16. She's smart enough to understand that sometimes people grow apart, and strong enough to handle it. What she can't handle is watching her parents destroy each other slowly." Julia nodded, wiping her eyes. "Okay, let's get divorced." It should have felt like defeat, but instead, it felt like relief. We'd finally stopped pretending, stopped trying to force something that was broken beyond repair. It wasn't the ending I'd wanted, but it was honest. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly civil. Patricia Wells had been right about Julia's tactical errors. Her affair, her abandonment of the family home, her attempt to hide assets had all weakened her position considerably. But I wasn't interested in destroying her. I just wanted out. We split our assets fairly, agreed on custody arrangements that gave Lily choice and stability, and managed to avoid the kind of bitter public battle that would have humiliated us both. Julia kept the gallery and her life in Millbrook. I kept the cottage and my new hobby. You know what's funny? Julia said on the day we signed the final papers. I thought leaving you would make me feel free, but mostly I just feel empty. Maybe that's not about me, I said. Maybe that's about Trent. Maybe. We were sitting in Patricia's office, having just signed away 15 years of marriage with a few pen strokes. It felt surreal, anticlimactic, like the end of a movie where the credits roll too soon. Do you think we could have made it work? She asked. If Trent hadn't died, if we'd really tried? I don't know. Maybe. But we'll never know now. I'm sorry, Ethan, for all of it. You didn't deserve what I put you through. No, I didn't. But I'm not sorry it happened. She looked at me in surprise. Really? Really. Because now I know who I am when everything falls apart. I know what I'm capable of when I have to fight for something I care about. And I know the difference between love and habit. What's the difference? Love fights back. Habit just endures. She smiled at that, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in months. You're going to be okay, aren't you? Yeah, I think I am. And I was. Better than okay, actually. The cottage was mine now, along with the peace that came with it. My painting had improved dramatically. Patricia said it was because I was finally painting truth instead of fantasy. Lily spent weekends with me, and our relationship had grown stronger through the crisis. Most importantly, I'd learned something valuable about myself. I wasn't the passive, accommodating husband I'd thought I was. When pushed, I could be calculating, ruthless, even dangerous. It wasn't necessarily an admirable discovery, but it was an honest one. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I got a call from Mrs. Kelleher at the gallery. Mr. Carter, I have a proposition for you. I'm listening. I'd like to offer you a show, your paintings. They've developed quite a reputation around town. People are curious about the man who survived such public humiliation with such grace. I'm not sure I want that kind of attention. Think about it. You've been through something that most people can only imagine. Your art reflects that journey. There's honesty in your work now that wasn't there before. A year ago, I would have dismissed the idea immediately. But a year ago, I was a different person. Weaker, more afraid, less willing to take risks. When? I asked. Next month. We'll call it After the Storm. Paintings from your recovery and transformation. Transformation, I like that. The show was a success, not because my paintings were masterpieces, but because they told a story people could relate to. Stories of betrayal, loss, recovery, and ultimately survival. The local paper did a feature article about my journey from successful architect to divorced artist, painting it as an inspiring tale of reinvention. Julia came to the opening, which surprised me. She looked good, healthier, more relaxed than she'd been in the final months of our marriage. These are beautiful, she said, standing in front of a painting I'd done of storm clouds breaking over the ocean. You've really found your voice. Thanks. How are you doing? Better. Sad sometimes, but better. The gallery's doing well. I'm thinking about expanding, maybe opening a second location in Portland. That's great. What about you? Anyone special in your life? I smiled. I'm learning to be special to myself first. Everything else can wait. She nodded. That's probably wise. We talked for a few more minutes, like old friends catching up, which in a way we were. The anger and hurt had faded, leaving behind something that wasn't quite friendship but wasn't hostility either. It was acceptance, maybe, or just exhaustion. After she left, I stood in the gallery surrounded by my paintings, listening to the conversations of strangers discussing my work, my life, my transformation. A year ago, this would have felt like exposure, like having my wounds displayed for public consumption. Now it felt like victory. I'd lost my marriage, but I'd found myself. I'd lost my wife, but I'd gained my daughter's respect. I'd lost my old life, but I'd built a new one that was entirely my own. Nate appeared at my elbow with 2 glasses of wine. So, how does it feel to be a famous artist? Surreal, Good, but surreal. You know what I think? What? I think this is the best thing that ever happened to you. The stroke, the affair, the divorce, all of it. Because it forced you to become who you were supposed to be all along. I looked around the gallery at my paintings, at the people discussing them, at the life I'd built from the ashes of my old one. You know what? I said. I think you might be right. 6 months after my gallery show, life had settled into a comfortable routine. I painted in the mornings, worked on cottage repairs in the afternoons, and spent evenings reading or walking on the beach. Lily visited every other weekend, and we'd grown closer than we'd ever been. She was applying to colleges now, talking about studying art history, maybe becoming a curator like her mother. Julia and I had achieved something I hadn't thought possible, a genuinely friendly relationship. We co-parented effectively, even socialized occasionally at town events. The raw wounds of our divorce had healed into scars that barely ached anymore. I should have known it was too good to last. The first sign of trouble came on a Tuesday morning when Patricia Wells called with an edge in her voice I hadn't heard since our divorce proceedings. "Ethan, I need you to come to my office immediately." "What's wrong?" "Just come. Now." I found her pacing behind her desk, a stack of official-looking documents spread across her normally pristine workspace. She looked up when I entered, her expression grim. "Sit down," she said. "Patricia, you're scaring me. The police have reopened the investigation into Trent Morgan's death." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What? Why?" "New evidence. Someone came forward claiming they saw another car on the road that night, possibly involved in forcing Trent off the road." My mouth went dry. "What kind of evidence?" "A trucker driving north saw what he thought was a road rage incident. 2 cars, one tailgating aggressively, the other swerving to avoid it. He didn't think much of it at the time, but when he heard about the accident, he started having doubts." "And he's just coming forward now?" "He was hauling illegal cargo that night, didn't want police attention, but his conscience finally got to him." I slumped in my chair, my mind racing. What does this have to do with me? Patricia pulled out a photograph and slid it across the desk. It was grainy, taken from a security camera, but clear enough to show a dark sedan following a red convertible on a nighttime road. The police ran the plates on the sedan. It's registered to Julia. The room seemed to tilt. "That's impossible. Julia was home that night. We talked about Trent's call, remember? She said she didn't go to see him." "Ethan, I need you to listen to me very carefully. The police are going to want to talk to you. They're going to ask about your marriage, about the affair, about your threats to Trent." "My threats?" Simon Hartley, the art critic, apparently kept detailed notes about that night at the gallery. "He's been talking to anyone who'll listen about your unstable behavior and violent threats." I laughed, but it came out hollow. "Violent threats? I never threatened violence." "You threatened his career, his reputation. In the context of his death, that's going to look suspicious." "But I didn't kill him. I was home that night, painting. Julia was there too." "Was she? Are you sure about that?" I tried to remember that Tuesday night, but the details were fuzzy. I'd been in my studio until late, working on a particularly difficult piece. Julia had gone to bed early, said she had a headache. I'd assumed she was there all night, but... "I need to call Julia," I said, reaching for my phone. "Ethan, don't. Not until we know more." But it was too late. The phone was already ringing, and Julia's voice was already answering, tight with stress. "Ethan? Thank God. We need to talk." "Are you at home?" "No. I'm at the police station. They've been asking questions about Trent's death, about that night. They think..." Her voice broke. "They think one of us killed him." I met Julia at her house an hour later, after she'd been released from questioning. She looked terrible, pale, shaken, like someone who'd seen a ghost, or become one. "Tell me what happened," I said. She poured herself a large glass of wine with shaking hands. "They showed me the security footage. My car following Trent's the night he died." but you said you didn't go to see him. I lied. She took a large gulp of wine. I did go. I couldn't stand the way we'd left things, all that anger and hurt. I wanted to say goodbye properly. So you followed him? Not followed. I knew where he was going. There's a scenic overlook about 20 miles north where we used to meet sometimes. I thought I could catch him there, talk to him one last time. And did you? She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her wine glass. He was so angry, Ethan. Angrier than I'd ever seen him. He blamed you for ruining his life, blamed me for choosing you over him. He said terrible things. What kind of things? He said he was going to make sure everyone knew what kind of man you really were, that he had evidence of your threats, your manipulation. He was going to destroy your reputation the way you'd destroyed his. I felt cold suddenly, despite the warm afternoon. What did you tell him? I told him to leave it alone, that we were all adults who'd made our choices. But he wouldn't listen. He kept ranting about revenge, about making you pay. So what happened? We argued. I tried to calm him down, but he was beyond reason. Finally, I gave up and left. I got in my car and drove home. And he followed you? No, he stayed at the overlook. That was the last time I saw him alive. I studied her face, looking for tells, for signs of deception. But Julia had always been a good liar, and stress made people unpredictable. Julia, I need you to tell me the truth. Did you have anything to do with Trent's death? No. The word came out sharp, definitive. I loved him, Ethan. Whatever else happened between us, I loved him. I would never have hurt him. Then why didn't you tell the police the truth from the beginning? Because I knew how it would look. The scorned lover meeting her ex one last time, then he conveniently dies in a car accident. I panicked. And now it looks even worse. I know. She started crying then, the kind of deep, wrenching sobs that come from genuine despair. They think I killed him. They think I forced him off the road in some kind of jealous rage. I wanted to comfort her, but something held me back, a nagging doubt, a sense that there were still pieces missing from this puzzle. What about the trucker's story? I asked. He said he saw two cars, one tailgating the other. I don't know. Maybe there was another car, someone else on the road, or maybe he's confused or lying. Why would he lie? I don't know, Ethan. I don't know anything anymore. That evening, I called Patricia and told her about my conversation with Julia. She listened without comment, occasionally making notes. What do you think? I asked when I finished. I think your ex-wife is in serious trouble. The police have motive, opportunity, and now physical evidence placing her at the scene. If they can establish that she was driving aggressively, that she forced Trent off the road. But she said she left before he did. She said a lot of things. Not all of them have been true. I spent that night staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together the events of that Tuesday night. Julia had been acting strangely in the weeks after Trent left town, distant, preoccupied, like she was carrying a secret. I'd assumed it was grief over losing him. But what if it was guilt? The next morning brought more bad news. The police had found additional evidence, paint transfer on Trent's car that matched Julia's sedan. The official cause of death was being changed from accidental to suspicious, and Julia was now the primary suspect in a homicide investigation. I should have felt vindicated. The woman who'd betrayed me, who'd chosen another man over our marriage, was finally facing consequences for her actions. But instead, I felt sick. Because despite everything that had happened between us, I didn't want Julia to be a murderer. For Lily's sake, if nothing else. That afternoon, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I drove to the scenic overlook where Julia claimed to have met Trent for the last time. It was a beautiful spot, a wide pullout with stunning views of the ocean and the rocky coastline below. It was also isolated, with no witnesses and no security cameras. I stood at the guardrail looking down at the rocks where Trent's car had been found and tried to imagine what had happened that night. Two people who'd once been lovers, now bitter and angry, having one final confrontation. Words escalating to violence, a moment of rage, a car forced off the road into the darkness below. But something didn't feel right. Julia was capable of deception, of manipulation, even of cruelty. But murder? I'd lived with her for 15 years, seen her at her worst, and I couldn't picture her deliberately killing someone, which left two possibilities. Either she was innocent, or she was a much better actress than I'd ever imagined. I was so lost in thought that I almost missed it. A flash of movement in my peripheral vision, someone watching me from the tree line. I turned quickly, but whoever it was had already disappeared into the woods. Paranoia, probably. Or maybe just a hiker. But as I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was very interested in my visit to the Overlook. That night I got my answer. A knock on my door at nearly midnight, insistent and urgent. I opened it to find Simon Hartley, the art critic, looking nervous and agitated. "We need to talk," he said. "It's midnight, Simon. This can't wait." He pushed past me into the cottage, glancing around nervously. "I know what really happened to Trent Morgan." I closed the door and turned to face him. "I'm listening. It wasn't Julia. She's innocent." "How do you know that?" Simon reached into his jacket and pulled out a small digital recorder. "Because I was there that night, I recorded everything.